Hello, today I'm going to be talking about Babel by R.F. Kuang. I know some people pronounce it Babel. I'm going to go with Babel for this review since I heard R.F. Kuang use that pronunciation. But this is a book about the business of colonization. It's also about imperialism and racism and colorism and revolution and many themes. We follow a young character named Robin Swift. At a very young age, he's living in Canton, China. His mother dies of cholera when a mysterious Professor Lovell comes and takes Robin away to London, where Robin is to study Greek, Latin, and Chinese. He's not to forget Chinese, he's to make sure he remembers it, and study his English so he fits in, and so he can be admitted into Babel, the prestigious language institute at Oxford University. And so Robin makes it there to Babel, and there he makes some friends in his cohort who are from other countries as well and speak different languages, including English. And there they are to do this translation magic through silver bars. And so this translation magic through silver, it manifests what gets lost in translation, but you need a skilled translator in order to accomplish this task. Thus why Robin and his friends are brought there. And I should say, even from the beginning of the book, there's a very strange relationship between Professor Lovell and Robin. Professor Lovell works there at Babel, and Professor Lovell makes sure Robin knows that Robin is his ward. He doesn't give any warmth to Robin, and you see within the first couple of chapters what Robin is willing to do to make sure he gets accepted or gets to get away from his situation in Canton. So I think that's worth reflecting back on as you read on in the book, because there's a lot that happens in his journey there at Oxford. At first, it seems like an academic paradise. He gets to study languages and learn and grow, and he loves literature. He loves books. He loves what he's studying. He's passionate about it. But by accident, he ends up mixing up with some revolutionaries there, and he finds out that while Oxford and Babel is claiming to use this translation power as a means towards communication and towards diplomacy and trade and through cooperation between foreign countries that would ultimately lead to wealth and prosperity for all, actually, the dollars go only one way. That this is all being used to manipulate other countries into trade deals that are ultimately to benefit the British. And so Robin and his friends are being exploited for this purpose, and it's very difficult to face this truth when these people who are exploiting you give you this beautiful illusion of how you can belong and the safety and stability you have in the place you have and how you should be so grateful. So Robin is driven by this very unconscious guilt and desire to belong, which is driving him towards conformity. And at the same time, once he starts to become conscious of this, he's also driven a bit towards rebellion and revolution and trying to see outside of it all, of the system that he has been brought up in. So Robin is very conflicted. He wants to belong. He wants to be an academic equal. He's made to feel as though he's needed but expendable. He wants to enjoy this place with his friends, but at what cost? So as you see this illusion unravel, you see what Robin chooses to do. This particular book, I would say, ends in a way I would expect it to end. I couldn't expect it to end any other way, and I think it was appropriate, it was well done, and I think those who have been to Oxford might enjoy reading the book, or even if you haven't, there are some great descriptions, I think, and there's even a map of the city of Oxford in the book. There's also a diagram of the Tower of Babel. The translation magic and all of the money going one way, and Robin and his friends being used for their language skills was an interesting conversation in this book, because earlier this year I had a wonderful conversation here on my channel with Alicia Guzman. She has a book club called the Lit and Translation Book Club, and we talked about why read translated fiction. And in that discussion, through that discussion with her and in the comment section, I learned that for one thing, it's very difficult to find translators to begin with who can translate a book from one language to another. But it's a whole other thing to have a skilled translator. It's not just somebody who's fluent in the language, it's somebody who understands a lot of the complexities and can bring it into written form in an effective way. That is a tremendous skill. The conversations about language in this book were interesting, especially about how Robin could easily forget about where he comes from, could easily forget his language. He could just be easily colonized in such a way that all that gets forgotten. I really appreciated all of that. It's very clear that R.F. Kuang did a ton of research for this book. It's heavily footnoted. It has historical aspects as well as fictional ones. And there's also some interesting history tied in regarding the Opium Wars. Now, I think that one thing with the revolution aspect of this book, which comes into the later half of the book, I won't give away much, but I will say that violence was explored in an interesting way, particular questions regarding at what point is diplomacy actually causing more harm and violence in the long run if you're trying to hold out for a diplomatic solution, and at what point does choosing violence cause more harm to innocent people, and that's your responsibility in taking that on. And can you separate anger from violence? That's another question that gets brought up. Now for some minor criticisms. I did find that the narrator's voice was a little heavy for my taste in this book, especially in the first half. I think there were just parts that I would have wanted explored more through the character perspectives than the narrator telling me how things were and the way things happened. And I know that there's a lot of talk about the, showing rather than telling approach. I did feel as though this book was heavily leaning towards the telling approach. And there were times in which I wanted just a bit more from that showing perspective and more tension build. So I think that's one little area that I just have a preference for, but I understand that R.F. Kuang did that with a purpose too. She did discuss this in her lecture, which I will link below. It's a fantastic lecture, and she explains why she was very overt with the themes. But at the same time, as I understand her rationale, and I think it's good, and again, please watch that video, I still felt as though there wasn't a lot of trust in me as a reader to wonder and speculate and have curiosity about things until maybe the second half. It was there, it just wasn't there as much as I would have preferred. But in the second half, what I appreciated was how this was accomplished, the overt themes were accomplished through character conversations. And I think that was preferable to me than the narrator's voice kind of explaining heavy-handedly the themes and what's happening. So, for example, in the second half of the book, we get questions about violence and the idea of being guilted into being grateful for the very system of colonization that you're being exploited to participate in. And so I appreciated all of that, especially in the second half of the book, but I just wanted a little bit more of that. I also wanted a little bit more emotional build between characters because, again, I felt as though the narrator was telling me a lot about how these characters felt about each other, but I didn't quite feel that or sense that until something very, some big upheaval happened between characters. So I kind of wanted tension building up to those moments. So, for example, in the Poppy War trilogy, and this will be spoiler-free for that, and not to compare those two stories too much because they are very different, but in the Poppy War trilogy, just thinking back even to the third book, the friendship between Kitay and Rin was demonstrated through certain ways they would look at each other or hold each other or squeeze one another's hand. And those moments made me believe these two people care about each other. I could feel that in their interactions with each other, just these subtle little ways that they would reach out for one another, these mannerisms or gestures they would have. And I didn't quite sense that with the characters in this book. So I just wanted more of that. It wasn't that it wasn't there at all, it just wasn't there as much as I had hoped. Having said all that, I still liked the book. I'm still glad I read it. I hope that my little nitpicks won't discourage people from this book because I'm in the minority. Most people have loved this book, but I think it's fair warning in case those things do get to you that you can know about them going in. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.